Yeah. Okay, we're recording, and what we're going to start talking about now is equations. We've talked about functions in general, and then we talked a little bit about expressions where we didn't have an equal sign, and we translated those from words to math. Today we're going to start talking about equations. Now, the difference between an equation and an expression is what?
Wait, a difference between an
An
equation
equations you solve. Equations have equal signs. Expressions you simplify. All right, there are a few vocabulary words that we need to know to be able to use them in solving these equations. So let's get those down first. And the first one is inverse operation or operations. Okay, what does the word inverse make you think of?
Like inverting,
Okay,
going in,
inverting. What is to invert? What does that mean?
like to
Like backwards.
Backwards. Very good, Aaron. Undo, maybe? Is Aaron right? Okay. Going backwards, inverted. It's like inverted loop when you're, I don't know, skating or skateboarding or whatever. It's when you go backwards. So the definition of inverse operation is two operations that undo each other. We're going to do a lot of undoing in solving equations. Okay? So a lot of inversion. If we see addition, we're going to have to do what to back it out? Undo. How do you undo addition? What's the opposite? Subtract. How about multiplication? How are you going to undo that? Divide it. Okay. So you've got it. So here is some operation and inverses. Two operations that undo each other. So like we said, addition, the inverse is subtraction. Multiplication, the inverse is division. What about squaring something? What's the inverse? Square root. Okay. And this goes both ways. Okay. That's it for now. Most of our time in Algebra 1 will be spent with these 3 to 6 operations. Thank goodness, right? We will deal with squares, which will be our quadratic functions, and that's probably about as far as we'll go with our functions. Okay, equivalent equations. What do you think that means, equivalent equation?
Equal.
Yeah. Equivalent means equal. Equations. And they are equations that have the same answer or solution. And we'll see some of those in just a minute. Now, there are 4 properties we're going to talk about today that we're going to use every time we're solving equations. The first 2 have to do with addition and subtraction, and they're the addition property and the subtraction property. Now that's a square root symbol. The addition property of equality. states that adding the same number to each side of an equation produces equivalent equations. So if you add 2 to one side, you need to add 2 to another side. It doesn't change the equation, it just helps you do something. So addition property of equality. Property of equality. Let me move this
Where are we doing
up.
our examples at?
You'll do them across the page on 20.
Okay, we'll say. So you meant squeeze them on this page.
And it states that subtracting the same number from each side of an equation I'll give you just a second to catch up in just a second. Produces equivalent equations. Use these properties a whole lot. So I will show you what I mean when I say these things. The what? All right. Here's an example of the addition property. And I just make a little box that says example. And then here, just write addition property. So when you look at the definition, you can look over here to this side of the page and have an example. Now, I know that what I'm about to write, you can work in your head. But look at what our objective was. I'm going to work one-step equations using algebra. So we're going to use algebra instead of our head. Ha-ha. Okay, here's the equation. Now, I know that you know that that's 14 minus 4 is 10, right? But here's how you do it with algebra. Now, I know you're going to want to skip this because it's so easy, but it's going to build, and you're going to need to be able to do this, so don't just ignore it. Okay, the inverse operation. What we're trying to do is solve for x. We need x equals. Okay? So what is x equals? We know that x equals 14, but let's do it this way. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my inverse operation. I'm going to undo this subtraction by adding 4 to both sides. Why do I have to add 4 to both sides? Exactly. That's the addition property of equality. It won't be the equivalent equation if I don't do it to both sides. It won't work. So when I have a negative 4 here and a positive 4 here, what do those do? Cancel. So all I'm left with is x. And then what is over here? 10 plus 4 is 14. Now when you do it that way, you've used a one-step equation to figure out the number that goes there. You're going, oh my gosh, really? Do we have to do this? Yes, because it's this one step that we'll use in multi-steps later. Okay? We're going to start with one-step equations. By the end of the week, we'll be on two-step equations. Beginning of next week, we're going to be on unlimited number of step equations. Okay? All right, so that's the addition property. We used addition to undo the subtraction. Now let's go the other way. Let's look at the subtraction property.
No.
So now our problem, this is what it starts out like, x plus 4 equals 10. Now I know and you know that's 6, but we're going to do this with algebra. We're going to use the inverse operation to undo this addition. So to undo a plus 4, what do? Minus 4. If we minus 4 over here, we've got to subtract 4 over there, right? When we add, we have 4 and we take away 4, that ends up being 0, so we can just cancel it out. All we're left with is our x. What are we left with on the other side? Our 6 that we knew went there anyway. But now you've used the subtraction property. So right here is where you did it. You used subtraction to undo the addition. And whatever you did here, you also had to do there. So make sure you do that to both sides of what we're going to call the fence for now. We'll get away from the fence later, but right now we're going to use this fence. There's our fence. There's our fence. All right, y'all okay with that? All right, I'm not going to change. All right. Let's look at a couple more definitions. We talked about addition and subtraction. What do you think we're going to talk about next? Very good. So turn to page 23.